in our firm, and he's got expertise in so many different fields. It's really a privilege to have him on our team, and he's here to talk to you about cryptocurrency and what it is and what you need to know about it. It's interesting to see on his bio, he talks about old school technologies, but here we are talking about something that's very cutting edge. So with that said, Lindsay, why don't you just introduce yourself and kind of take it away.
Sounds good. Well, good morning, everybody. I think it's morning where y'all are. As David said, my name is Lindsay Timke. I'm a signing director here at CLA, Clifton Larson Allen. I come here, I've been here 3 years, and to David's point, you can tell that this bio is a little older because I'm actually coming up on my 30th anniversary on working in IT. And in the last probably 10 years, I've become one of the nation's experts on doing crypto audits for publicly traded firms. What makes you an expert in this area is simply just doing more than most other people. And by the way, just curious, if everyone could make sure that their phones and their computers are on mute. I only bring this up just because we're getting a little bit of back feedback. Anyway, thank you, everybody. And so what we're trying to bring to the table today is I'm trying to make sure that everyone here gets a nice understanding.
Yeah, hold on one second. We're still getting some feedback here. I'm wondering if I might be able to mute all participants. Do you know if that's possible?
Good question.
Yeah, if you can check, if you're dialed in with your phone and can mute your microphone, that would be very helpful. We're seeing one particular. Let's see. Okay, I think we're good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, and what we're going to try to accomplish today, folks, and this is since there's not a lot of us here, there's a good number, but there's not a lot. I encourage y'all, interrupt me. Feel free to say, hey, Lindsay, stop. And remember, I can't see you because I've got the screen up in front of me with the presentation. So feel free to audibly interrupt me. So the goal for today is really talk about crypto and give you really the basic fundamentals and the building blocks and the history of it. And so there is going to be so many things here that are very tough things to understand. And I'm going to try to put them in such a way that at least to give you a cursory to moderate level of understanding of what you might be hearing and seeing. But again, stop me if you want me to explain something deeper, if you have questions. Okay. So we're going to go into the history of crypto. Obviously, what is crypto? How does it work? And the risks in the current markets. Funnily enough, which is an interesting little side piece about me, is I am actually not an advocate of cryptocurrency. I do have crypto of my own, but I largely do it as it pertains to my job, and I am not a big proponent of people investing in it and whatnot. And hopefully you'll see some of what my areas of caution are around this. But I guess that's the whole thing about what you'll see me talk about today is I'm going to say to you is I think that working and diving into using crypto on a personal level is something you should do cautiously. And I know I sound like my parents when I say this, but you also want to make sure you obviously put nothing in there you can't afford to lose because it is such a volatile market. All right, so let's just do that. All right, so it's kind of funny because cryptocurrency actually came into real being, and it was actually brought up by an American of all people. David Chaum in 1983 came up with it. And it was largely because he was a cryptographer and he had started thinking about different ways to move basically currencies around and using cryptography to do it. And so what's really come out of this though is, and it's really been an explosion of how we've taken this cryptocurrency and tried to make it into a real viable currency market, a secondary market out there. Now, that said, what we're going to start off right away with is it's important when you get into crypto that you understand that at its core, cryptocurrency has an underpinning of illegal transactions, period. And so it depends on who you really talk to. It can be like they show in this slide, 0.15% to almost as high as 46%. And so when I started diving into this over the years, I started really wanting to understand if this was largely just a lot of like hearsay, people, being like myself, people who are my age and older were getting a little like, oh, do we really think that we want people to use this? And they were starting to like see the boogeyman and thinking it was all illegal transactions going on. Well, it turns out that it was actually the case. It was actually a lot of illegal transactions were going on. And so just trying to find a place to put David. There we go. So this right here, and I hope you all can see it. I'm in the process now of getting the most recent statistics for 22. But if you take a look at this, this is the percent change in the value of crime types. Okay, so if you look at the green, which is the far right bar on the first in 2018 and 2021, stolen funds were the biggies of the largest percent increase. We're talking over a 400% increase in them. Obviously, scams, those are the ones, folks, like we always have seen, like the prince or the king who wants you to throw him 2 Bitcoins, blah, 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 these types of things. And then we also have the various things like child abuse and darknet. Now, it's interesting is, and I'm going to walk you through this, is where criminals were using coins, they're considered almost like IOUs in the criminal underworld. And what I mean by that is, in order for a drug dealer to basically to use this market, what they would do is they use the Bitcoins as essentially an IOU between drug dealers. So if someone wants to ship 20 tons of cocaine, you might think to yourself, that's really, really difficult, and that would high probability of getting caught. Well, in actual fact, a lot of these people don't get caught with the shipping of things, whether it be people, drugs, or whatnot. Usually, just like Jimmy Hoffa, they get caught with the money. And moving funds around nowadays in the 21st century, it's very, very difficult and it's very hard. So Bitcoin became the currency of choice because it basically was marketed, as you've all heard, as being untraceable. Well, as over the years, that's now become a little bit less so, but it still has not stopped the fact that the entire underpinnings of the crypto market were pinned on illegal activity. So now we look at those numbers again in a different way, though. All right, so we look at this in actual dollars and cents. And as you can see, the overall trending has been going up. Now, if you look in 2021, which is on the far right here, okay, we still have stolen funds, but we are seeing an increase of almost $3 billion up from 2019, the last time that it really spiked. Okay, and we're seeing again stolen funds and scams. Stolen funds would be in the case of where people are in fact actually by mistake giving away their private keys to their wallets when they're doing transactions, stuff like that. The fraud and stuff like the other stuff like fraud and scams, those are more different. Those will come into place where we look at like businesses where they're in fact actually getting people saying, we want you, they come into, they email and do a phishing scam to your finance department. And they say to your finance department, this is your CEO, I need 5 Bitcoins wired to this address because we're working on a deal. Those are types of scams. But anyway, as you can see here, there's an overarching and bedrock of crypto, which at the crypto level, which is illegal activity. And why this is important also, though, is it's actually created by mistake an underpinning of where it creates a bottom floor, if you will, in the market, meaning that the coins can only go down so deep and so far because the underpinning aspect of it is through illegal activity creates almost a certain level of a floor that it cannot go below. The example I give to people regarding this is, since I live in Boston, when I moved here, the market was all over the place, going up and down. But after a couple of years, Boston University built a hospital over here, BU Medical. And what happened in my neighborhood was suddenly the housing market here became very steady because all the doctors moved into town, and it created this artificial floor where at the end of the day, out of 2,000 apartments, only 1,000 of them would ever hit the market. Ergo, the rates of the apartments went up a bit and so forth and so on. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, a certain percentage of the coins will always be held by criminals or are held by criminals. Ergo, the price, they're not going to get rid of them. So the price becomes stable at a certain point. Okay. So what is crypto? Now that I've given you a bit of the history of it. Okay. it's important for us all to realize this, because this, when I've been doing the audits, and I'm right after I'm done on this call and this transaction or this conversation, I have a call internally where I'm actually going to be having a discussion with a number of our big partners to walk them through how cryptocurrency is being used, because a number of them cannot seem to, just like everybody else nowadays, can't seem to get their minds wrapped around the fact that a cryptocurrency is not like a dollar bill or a pound sterling Deutschmark. It is not backed by the US government. We do not have any federal agencies that are at this juncture backing them, like the FDIC does not back them. It is essentially, for those of us who are over the ages of, say, 40, 45, if you remember the bearer bonds back when we were younger, it is essentially a coin that is basically in the ether. It's digitalized. If you're lucky, you can hold them on the thumbstick. That would be considered a wallet. And it's where the digital transaction resides. But it is not backed or maintained by any government in the world, and it is not backed by any US federal agency. So that's the good point just to remember, is that you're not looking at a tangible asset, okay? So, and these are, as we're going through these, I'm going to be giving you a lot of terms, and then what I'm going to try to do is try to bring them all together and show you how they all become parts of the same, okay? So, non-fungible tokens, all right. So, there's a lot of things here and a lot of definitions. A non-fungible token, okay, it's used as a part of a blockchain. A blockchain, and I'm going to go through this in a minute, but I'll start right now. A blockchain is essentially a number, basically what the name implies. It's blocks. So say 8 blocks. And when I say a block, think of it like a Rubik's Cube, if you will. Imagine 8 Rubik's Cubes attached to each other. They're linked together. Now, what happens is each of those blocks on that chain hold information. And it can be Bitcoin and it can be other things. Well, the other things that can be held on those blockchains are NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Okay, it's a irrevocable digital certificate of ownership. And like you can see on bullet number 2, I call it a bearer bond. So what it largely is non-fungible tokens are essentially often used to show ownership and deed of ownership to something like a Monet, like in the case of my example about the drug dealers, a carton of drugs, whatever it might be. But these tokens are used, and they are basically, if you have it, if you have the token, you have what is the pink slip on that token. Now, again, if you see my third bullet here, and I'm going, this is bringing back again to the illegal activity of it. It's really interesting. Only 9% of non-fungible tokens are owned, or the 80% of the value of them is owned by 9% of the people. All right. So what that means is, and again, it goes back to where a lot of the drug dealers, a lot of illicit activity is being housed at that level. But as you can tell, when it comes to non-fungible tokens, that would mean that it makes it so that, again, these tokens are very much and very good currency to be used by the underworld, because, again, they cannot be found. They do not transmit the actual item itself. Again, it's an IOU. Ergo, it's very easy for people to throw them back and forth. And it's very hard for people like the various law enforcement agencies to keep up with it, because you don't have to say this is the deed to a house or this is the deed to a carton of drugs. You can say whatever you want as long as the other party knows what it is you're talking about. Okay. All right, so we have ETFs, exchange traded funds. These are kind of interesting things. When we look at cryptocurrency, we're all taught on the news that it's Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. That's great. And a lot of people try, when they get involved in the coins, to go right out and buy some Bitcoin. A, incredibly expensive. B, you're jumping, like it's almost like if you were to be trading stocks, it's like you doing day trading instead of going with more of a broker or a more safe route. ETFs, exchange traded funds, are much more easy to use. They're more secure. They're better as far as your risk profile, meaning because it's a fund, just like you would get with like Magellan or something from Fidelity, blah, blah, blah. it would be a number of coins, Bitcoin, Ether, Ethereum, and it would be a number of coins put together, or companies that trade these coins. And it makes it so that your risk is not as volatile and going all over the place. I definitely get involved in these quite a bit. I found over time, not surprisingly, that they usually run counter to traditional firms. My wife invests a lot in what I refer to as more old school stocks like Costco or an Exxon. And if you were to pit those against where I am trading on exchange traded funds, I find that when her funds are going down, mine are usually on the rise. So they seem to have the antithesis of each other. And as I say in bullet number 2, very much like a 401k and what you would see there. And so I definitely don't have, I'm not even telling you to invest in them, but I am definitely saying that those are a lot safer as far as the Bitcoin markets. And again, this is just another term for us to get to. So as we're going through these, you're going to say, Lindsay's giving us a lot of terms, but how does it all come together? I hope by the end of this, you'll see how I'm trying to pull it all together. Okay, so hence how does it work? Okay, so now that we've touched on a number of the different subjects, now we're going to talk on the essence of this, blockchain. Okay, blockchain and what makes it so attractive to the outside world, especially, and we're just going to keep going back and using our illicit activities. It's scared, but it is also, it doesn't just make it so it's cash or cash-like substances. It can also be, as we talked about on a couple slides ago, about assets that are actual tangible things. Putting things in here that you or I might be interested in would be boats, houses, cars. Yeah. And we got the other things like cash. But again, this is to show you that it definitely follows the IOU. So as you have a blockchain, the blockchain, as we talked about, is, say, 8 Rubik's Cubes attached together. Those then make up the blockchain. Each of the blocks on the chain houses different information along the chain. And those assets on each of them can be related, unrelated. They do not have to be sequential or anything. Okay. And we can also see things that are really where companies, again, have started to show that they really are digging this technology are the things like the intangibles, like IP patents. Well, funnily enough, there are still a lot of paranoid people out there. And then when they're working, especially in the biotech, biopharmaceutical industries, and they like to be able to communicate things with other countries, other people, other scientists around the world, and they don't feel comfortable sending it in an email. And forget about free text, even encrypting it free text. They feel like using a blockchain and transmitting it through the blockchain is far more secure than using the old traditional schools of communication. And I would say largely that was the case for about the last 5 years, but in the recent year, we've seen the blockchain is definitely not nearly as secure and or as defensible as what people would lead you to believe. Okay, so now we have a blockchain. Well, now how does a blockchain work? Well, it works on a ledger. Okay, much like if you go to Bank of America, you go to your branch, right? No one here, I don't believe, watch, someone will prove me wrong, but no one, I believe, has ever gone to Bank of America corporate to cash a check or to wire transfer money. They go to a branch. All right, so when we look at the blockchain, if you will, we largely are talking about with blockchain is a decentralized network, okay, as opposed to a centralized network. So if we look over here on the left-hand corner, you see centralized network. That would be Bank of America. That would be a tire. And you've got all the spokes coming into the centerpiece. All those spokes are the branches, and they're all feeding into the mothership here, into the center, the corporate. And the corporate is basically who feeds out all the information to the other branches. So branches feed the corporate aspect, and corporate feeds individually the branches. But it does not allow the branches, in most cases, most times you're not seeing the branches doing all their communications between each other and whatnot like that. Well, and you also usually don't see a branch housing all the same type of information as corporate. Well, if you go down to the second layer here of decentralized networks are essentially, if you can imagine that the mothership, in this case, the corporate office, does not exist. Imagine now all these little dots you see around the outside. All of those dots are computers, and I mean like laptops. And in a decentralized network, and I'm referring to as it refers to blockchain, what occurs here is that each one of these computers maintains its own essential ledger of everything that's going on this blockchain. And so why this is important is, say, imagine you had 100 of these decentralized networks, 100 of these computers going on. Well, each one of them would have the information that's being stored, as opposed to, so they each have their own individual ledger, and each version of the truth, each of those versions of the truth should mirror image the other ones on all the other computers at any given time. When they communicate with each other, and I'll get into this in a couple slides, what they do is, though, is each of the blocks has got its own code that it transmits so that people can know that, oh, yes, this is actually a valid code. But it's how each of these computers, which we call in our industry nodes, each of these nodes, how they communicate is by that code I just mentioned on the blockchain, how that they know this computer can reach out to this computer and they can sit there and go, I am looking for this number, which is the code between these two blocks. Yes, you have it. Good. I know that they agree. The information's secure and safe. Now, what we're going to talk about, and I'll get into it briefly right now, is why blockchain has been so good over the years is because those numbers, those codes I was just referring to that link the blocks together. So what happens is on those 8 Rubik's Cubes we mentioned, if you can imagine it, remember how all the colors going down one side, you really, as a kid, you'd try to like twist and turn them and get all the colors the same? Well, if you can imagine, that's the code on the Rubik's Cube. And the code on that Rubik's Cube has to match identically to the other Rubik's Cube, the next one in the chain. So each of the colors on the side would have to be matched identically in this analogy. It's actually numbers in real life, but the color codings would be the same thing. And so you would see block 1 would have to link to the start of block 2. The end of block 2 would link to the start of block 3, so forth and so on. And each of those numbers make it so that, in fact, they know if the other one's right. If a hacker like Lindsay or David comes in and I try to hack into the third block on the chain, it starts to scramble the numbers. It alters the numbers. Anybody who touches them, it moves the numbers around. And ergo, the code at the end of the block now would have been changed and it would no longer match up with the next code starting the next block. And ergo, it would then be that they would want to, or that the system would pull that block out of utilization, saying that it was compromised. And then the next node would look at it and go, yes, but we have a copy of that node, of that block, we can put back into place. So again, a little bit complicated, but trying to make sure that we're going to walk through this enough times where you might all come out and get a good feel for it. All right. So centralized networks, we just talked about them briefly. This was my Bank of America example. All right. So again, it's a master server and it handles all the data processing and whatnot. For those of you in banking, which I'm assuming a number of you probably are, is if you remember back enough years back, this was back when there was no interstate commerce between different banks and they couldn't go across borders and whatnot like that. So again, using my Bank of America analogy, you would have them and they would have been in, say, North Carolina, and they then would have had you all as branches would have to send, and then back in the old days, you'd have to actually mail it and send it that way and use runners to transmit all the data back. Now, over time, that's not the case, and we've done away with those laws, or they're different now. And so what that means, though, is that this central node, this master computer at Bank of America, though, is still located in North Carolina, but all the branches throughout the world are at some point pushing data back and forth. Again, the blockchain, however, says we don't believe in a master node. We don't believe in a master computer. Every computer should be a single source of truth amongst itself. Okay. So with that said, you see the old one, like I pointed out, and this one, I like this. This is one of my favorite images. You've got the left side is the central. So we're going to say that's old school, traditionalized banking. We're going to now say that, and by the way, I've seen a lot of banks who are actually now moving toward more trying to emulate the decentralization look. But the decentralization look, this is right here on the right side, exactly, if anyone asks you, this is exactly how the blockchain works. Blockchain is essentially, so you've got the network is how it's all being routed around the world. You've got the blockchain, which is in fact the strand that uses the decentralized network. And then you've got blockchain, you've got Bitcoin, which would be then, or could be then, put into any one of those blocks on the chain, just like Ethereum could, or any other crypto could, or as we've just discussed, or any non-fungible tokens, or anything like that. Those all can be put in there, and then they get routed around on this decentralized network. Now, if you can imagine each of these dots on this decentralized network, say the one I'm pointing out, or the one on the left here is that Singapore, the US, Canada, they might be all around the world. Again, creating a lot more stability for if we're worried about governments toppling, problems in the Ukraine or Russia. Well, while this is all over the world, and in some of these nodes might be in countries or in regions where there's in some flux, again, the decentralized aspect of it, and it all creating a single source of truth that's maintained across all nodes, it makes it so we're never worried about any one area bringing down the entire system. This then also lends into the modern day with ransomware attacks and all the rest of it. Traditionally, with a centralization of things, you're worried about ransomware. Ransomware would in fact then cripple a centralized network, where a decentralized network, it can literally be shut down and you can remove that node from operation and you don't miss a beat. That's the overall an overarching aspect of why blockchain is supposed to be better and more safe. Okay, do that. Okay. Okay, this also brings up now why it's also fast, is because when we're not relying on all transactions being brought through one single computing source, we don't have to have a server farm the size of a football field to house it anymore. By using each system in a decentralized way and having all the nodes running independently, it allows for processing speeds to go up and for information to travel faster. Okay, and so it really, again, it's lending toward multiple facets of things going smoother. What I mean by that is not only is it creating a, and I'm using air quotes, safer environment, but it's also lending toward quicker, less energy output, yes, energy utilization, things of that nature. Now, here's where we're going to start really digging into things that I think that y'all might be a little bit interested. Now they've given you the overarching aspects. So these are the different types of terminologies that we've got in crypto. A lot of them, once you really start to like understand the world, you'll really start realizing they do actually make quite a bit of sense. A public key is essentially, there's two keys that are needed when you're working with Bitcoin or any of the other cryptos. A public key, consider that to be almost like your email address. Okay, that's what you would send out to everybody. And then and that's something you need so that you can work with blockchain, I'm sorry, with Bitcoin, blockchain, all of it. But then you have the private key. The private key is the thing that you have to guard with, like, jokingly, with your life. This is where everyone's gotten into trouble over the years, or many people have gotten into trouble with the private key. Taking a brief second here, there was a guy, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. He had one of the original sets of Bitcoin, and he had it on a wallet in cold storage, which essentially, for everyone on this call, that is essentially you having a USB stick, and he had his coins being housed in storage on there, which essentially means that the code for them is on that stick, which is normal. The problem was, though, is he created and put his information down on a paper key, which means he basically wrote it down, and then he lost it. And he then tried to employ people to try to find and break into and get the key back. Well, you're only given so many tries. I believe in his case, he had his set to 10, and he used 9 trying to break into it. So they stopped at the 9th, and I believe they still never tried the 10th, but they couldn't figure it out. So what it means is, since he doesn't have his private key anymore, that I believe he's about $3 billion in coins on that stick. That is money that will never be gotten again, because if he tries for the 10th time and the password and he fails, it automatically will wipe everything on there. and there is no other private key. So to be very clear, when you deal with crypto, this is the single most vulnerable point, in my opinion, of the entire thing. That is where you keep your password, because I'm sure every person on this call, if they're being truthful with themselves, would say that they have lost a password in their lifetime. And this is the one thing that you would really, really be not so happy with yourself if you lost. So now we go to bullet 3, cold storage. This is an interesting point. So when crypto was all being started, well, everybody likes to have everything online because, well, that just makes it easier to get to. Hackers love it when you make things easier to get to. So what happened with crypto was, because the entire essence of crypto is for privacy and to make it so it's not broken into, they started calling things cold storage. Cold storage, kind of what the name implies. They decoupled their wallets. The wallet is where you store your Bitcoin or your non-fungible tokens. They decoupled it from the internet. They basically pulled it out and said, great, we're going to put it on a thumb drive or some other type of removable medium, and that will keep it in a safe. And it never gets attached to the internet. Ergo, it's less likely to get hacked because it's not on the internet. People there, that's been another interesting one, because now people are susceptible to things being stolen. And it's just like the old passwords of old. People love putting their cold storage digital wallet with $200 million of Bitcoin on it in their safe. They've done a great job. And what they do is, because they don't want to ever forget their password, they will tape their password right to the top of their cold storage wallet, and they'll put it in their safe and make sure not to lock it, and go back to it in a couple of years and realize that, oops, because one of their kids decided that it looked kind of cool and it must have a fun game on it because it was a thumb drive in dad or mom's safe, and they went to use it and they couldn't find the password, and oops, they accidentally deleted it all. These are all things that have happened. So this is why, again, the password and the cold storage way you store things, very, very important. All right. A hot wallet is what the exact opposite of a cold wallet is. Basically, it's all stored on the internet. A lot more risky, but this, right, when we go back to talking about what I was saying before about the funds, and if the bank that you're at allows for trading online through what's referred to as an API, if they allow that, this is where you would have your password, you would log in, and then you would go into your brokerage account, and then lo and behold, all your information is in there once you log in. Again, it's a very, very, it's very secure, but again, it's less secure than cold storage. Okay. Risks in the current markets. Now, I don't think I have to say this to anyone unless people have been on an island somewhere, which with the pandemic, you never know. Volatility, huge in the market right now. And largely it's because there's been a lot of unfounded claims, and there's also, it's in its infancy as far as for a crime. And what I mean by that is we've seen FTX, we've seen Voyager Digital, the list goes on. And it's mostly because, and this is really interesting for this group. So if you are buying Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, the single biggest takeaway for you today, and this is, I'm talking for individuals or companies, whoever decides to buy the coins, there's an issue at play right now in the market, and it's called custodial accounts. So what's going on is, if David Fanson, I'm going to use my colleague, if David Fanson decides to buy 10 Bitcoin, and he decides, and by the way, so everyone was aware of this, I'm just using random banks. I have zero knowledge of any of their practices. So this is just me explaining to use an example. So let's just say David Fanson uses Chase Manhattan. Okay. Now he buys his coins through Chase Manhattan because Chase Manhattan has an agreement to allow its customers, because they want to be full service, they allow their customers to use their trading platform, and they've got a trading partner. There's a number of crypto companies out there that will partner with banks, and they create an API, which is a linkage to the broker account. So David Fanson then can trade different types of Bitcoins and different types of coins and different types of funds through them. Now, what happens, and this is where I go back to the aspect of custodial, is David Fanson buys the coins. He asks Chase Manhattan, I would like to buy 2 coins. Here's $20,000. Chase Manhattan notifies the brokerage company. They sit there, then come back and say, great, we have purchased your 2 coins for David Fanson. David Fanson says, like every other person who does this, great, I'm going to use your account, Chase Manhattan, with your brokerage account, and you're going to store the coins and my passwords for me. This is them taking a custodial ownership of David's coins. Now, why is this important? Because what happened with companies like Voyager Digital and FTX, for those of you who don't know, those are 2 of the biggest implosions, both in financial sector, but also straight up in crypto. And what happens is that a lot of these crypto trading companies were taking David's coins overnight, and they were using an old aspect of doing things, which was they were taking them and loaning them to other firms for the night, or for a day, or for a week. A firm might have had a ransomware attack and they needed $20 million in Bitcoin to pay us a loan. And that's great. So this trading platform would loan those coins over. Now, what happened was, in the case of, say, Voyager Digital, they loaned $600 million in coins over to another company. And that company sat there and turned around and said, thank you so much. We're not going to pay you back, but have a nice day. And what happens is if those coins in a lot of cases are in fact their customers, like the David Fansons of the world. The company, the trading platform that traded those coins did not have the ownership of those coins. Those coins were owned by David Fanson, not by the trading company who was using them as collateral. And so what's happened is, you'll see in these articles you read, is that's why there's all this like litigation about who owns the coins, when can these people get their coins back? Because if you remember these coins, and it's really an interesting thing to remember, is these coins are not insured by the FDIC. So the way that people have to get them back is that, in this case, I'll use Voyager, is that another big firm, another big trader called Binance, said that they would buy Voyager to honor those trades. So this is how that has to happen, but it's why it cannot, it's got more risk than traditional banking. So by saying all of that, we've got the extreme volatility, and the scams are just coming out of the woodwork. I mean, people are getting really creative with some of these scams that are going on. And when it comes to ransomware attacks, I can say this as I've seen them. Ransomware attacks against companies, it has become a business. And what I mean by that is, when someone, back in the old days, someone would lock up your machine and you get some really, really creepy, cryptic notes and they wanted, money. Well, now they'll actually leave you a phone number and say, hi, we are your ransomware takers. Nice to meet you. Please send this email to your legal department, have them contact us at this phone number, and we will walk them through the terms and how best to achieve getting us the Bitcoin in the time allotted. And if they don't have Bitcoin, we will also point you how to get this achieved. They are very polite, and it's a business to them. So it's really, I mean, if it wasn't tragic, it would be a little funny, but it's they are very much like a business now. It is not like your scams of old. Lack of regulation, folks. Anybody who tells you that it's regulated or that there's a regulation that they're pointing to, no. The regulations, this is the Wild West. And I'm dealing with one right now, specifically of someone who has made a significant loan to a company, to a crypto company, and they're citing to me legal arguments of why it's okay that they, and I'm talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're citing to me saying, oh, well, we have legal opinions saying why we should be able to get our money back if anything went wrong. And my statement to everyone on this call is, lawyers can tell you anything they would like, and a legal opinion is an illegal opinion. But when it comes to you all and buying Bitcoin and whatnot like that, there is no case law to speak of that is going to govern the outcome. So right now, it's everyone's best guess as to which side the law comes down on these things, because there is really no one regulating this arena. Okay, so now going a little bit deeper, and Just curious, does anyone want to give me a time check of how am I doing here so that I don't keep people too long? No? That's all right.
Just take the time that you need.
I'm sorry?
You're just fine, Lindsay, so take the time that you need. We'll ask questions as we go.
Okay,
Okay.
cool beans. All right. So now that said about what I was saying about it's not being regulated. Now that said, a number of organizations have really tried to chime in, but everybody's dipping their toe in, but no one wants to jump in full force because the water's not warm enough yet. And the NCUA, basically, it's interesting. They've informed the credit unions they can use the technology behind cryptocurrency if they follow NCUA principles. Now, what does that mean? Well, what most firms in the credit union space have taken this to mean is that, again, they will not let them work with Bitcoin or Ethereum directly. However, we go back to our funds. And so a lot of the NCUA is warmed up to the idea of, okay, if you work with a trading platform or a fund, then we're okay with these different organizations to team with them to provide that information or to provide that service. And in the case of a number of the credit unions that I have seen, again, I am only speaking from my own personal experience. The ones I have seen is dipping their toe in tentatively, mostly because, again, the legal precedents behind a lot of this are being made up right now, and no one wants to be the next one to have something go wrong. So the NCUA is providing some guidance, but they are not wholeheartedly endorsing anything yet. Securities and Exchange Commission, they kind of went the direction of saying we'll approve some of the futures and some of the traded funds. Again, some of the stuff I was talking about, but that's about it. And this was all prior to what we saw, folks, with the implosion of FTX and Voyager Digital and those. Those had not imploded. Since then, we've seen a bit more of everyone saying we're going to, and I say everyone, the different agencies are saying we've got to regulate that. And there's, they're all speaking a lot about it, but no one has stepped up and said, we're good to go. And here's the regulations we're going to give you. Okay. Now, the third bullet down here, remember again, because this is a mistake, and I saw it yesterday, and I saw it actually at an accounting firm. People are still trying to treat crypto like it is actually a legal tender. It is not USD, pound sterling, Deutschmark, none of that. And it's also not able to be treated like a home or a car. And what I mean by that is we've seen a number of folks who are trying to also give collateral in the form of coins. And I was running into this yesterday and someone said, oh, well, it's like a house. We'll just, we're going to make it so that they have to put up 67% collateral for it because it's like a building. Well, the problem is with something like crypto is it has such wild fluctuations. And so you don't see the US dollar fluctuating like this does. I mean, sometimes this thing will lose half its value in a given 24-hour period. And so you've got to keep that in mind when you're dealing and working with cryptocurrencies that, again, is so easy to lose track of and think of, oh, it's like a dollar bill. It is definitely not. Okay, 1 second, just gonna move over to the next slide. Okay, and then I come into the question part because I really wanted to open it up as I find that at these discussions, people genuinely have more specific questions than I can get into as an overview. And I'm just gonna kill that so I can see anyone's face. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts? Anyone have anything they want to discuss or hear about? No, everyone's looking at me like they got it completely, huh? So
we have a question, Lindsay, in the room here.
Just regarding the SEC approving futures ETF for Bitcoin, I'm curious why they haven't done one for a spot yet, or if that is coming, or just curious why they didn't have a spot.
I apologize. It's a bit of an echo in your room. I'm having a bit of trouble hearing you. David, did you hear what was asked?
No, I was struggling the same way. So, Stacy, maybe since you're closer to the audio microphone, can you repeat the question?
I'm wondering why futures Bitcoin ETF has been approved, but not spot Bitcoin ETF. I was just curious if you had thoughts on that.
And again, I swear I am listening to you, David. Did you catch it? Because I still am not hearing all
So,
of this.
are you talking about the future of regulation?
There's a Bitcoin right now. There's a Bitcoin ETF, right? It's a futures ETF.
The futures ETF.
Oh yes, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yes, okay.
Will there be a spot Bitcoin ETF coming? I think Grayscale is kind of using that. I was curious if your thoughts on that.
Will there be a spot Bitcoin ETF coming?
Sorry, Dave. Good.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you type the question in the text, because the echo is hard to hear. But you think you caught the gist of the question, Lindsay?
If you could type it, that's great. But yes, I think I heard what you said, and no, there is no intention for that to be coming down the pipeline, as far as I know.
I have a question. Can you talk about Celsius for a while and what happened there?
Celsius?
Bankruptcy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Bankruptcy.
That's
a big one.
Yeah. Again, very similar. Well, let me ask you this then, because I'm kind of curious about this. Do you have an understanding of what you think occurred with it?
Yeah. I've tried to read through it and follow it and the YouTube things, and my son has information on it. Yes.
So
yeah, from the earned accounts versus the qualified accounts, whatever language they use there. And the judge decided to say, well, in all the fine print here, our interpretation of this is that you don't own it.
You nailed it. I mean, yep.
How did I miss that? I didn't read the fine print. Is that right?
Yes. What the gentleman's referring to is on all of these engagement, or on all of these types of transactions, you will get a small booklet of just like you used to do from banks when you would do like transactions as far as trading stocks and whatnot. And I'm guessing from what I heard from the gentleman who just was talking that he didn't read the individual didn't read the fine print, and it basically was when it got litigated, the judge turned around and said, "That's great, thank you for playing, but you actually don't own it, they do." And this is what I was referring to when I said it's the Wild West out there, because right now, anybody who tells you that you are guaranteed to have ownership of a coin in a relationship where multiple people have their hands on it, specifically in these relationships with banking and with exchanges, that's not the case. And it's usually like when you were a child, if you remember your parents saying, or the kids on the playground would say, ownership's 9/10 of the law. Well, it was true when you were a kid, and it's true now with Bitcoin.
Yeah, possession.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah, and that's what I tell my staff all the time when we have to come in and look at and untangle these things. It's basically, at the end of the day, it's like a giant game of a hot potato. You know, whoever's got it at the end wins. So forgive me if I say your name wrong. Ches, you got your hand up.
Yeah.
Would you like to ask the question?
That was my question. I wanted some response. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let me go to the chat.
So yeah, Lindsay, we have the question written in the text. Will there be a spot Bitcoin ETF? Why was the future Bitcoin ETF approved by the SEC but not a spot EFT yet? So
we have one person here who's definitely got more knowledge than they were letting on. So all right. So the question is, will there be a spot Bitcoin ETF? And why was a futures Bitcoin ETF approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission? In my humble opinion, why was it approved? And that was because in my opinion, they got a tremendous amount of pressure to start to allow for futures and to allow for that aspect of the trading to continue and to move forward. I don't think that right now, in my opinion, that there will be a spot Bitcoin ETF. That's just my opinion. And I do think it's right now, it's based on who is pushing for the legislation and who's saying it the loudest right now. I think that there is no concerted, unified answer that's coming out of the court systems at all. It seems to be one-off opinions, and the regulators, again, seem to be taking their time. Securities and Exchange Commission seems to be almost leading the pack as far as their willingness to at least open up just to this even. Does that help at all?
Yep.
More or less.
Yeah, great questions, great questions.
Lindsay, if you could talk a little bit about the Central American country that did, I don't know if there still are, but at least experimented with using NFT as their, I guess, replacement for a fiat currency, how that's went, and really, is this something that without lack of regulation, I mean, is it scalable, right? In today's commerce, without regulation, will people have enough trust in that, in NFTs to use that in transactions?
Sure. And I've run into this, and funnily enough, I've run into a number of nation states trying this one. A lot of them do it more behind the scenes, if you will. Going to replacing out your fiat currency with an NFT has been almost a dream of a number of the different municipalities / governments that I've run into. And what they're really trying to do is trying to create a way to do away with a number of their crimes is what they're really looking at doing, and stabilizing themselves in the meantime. That said, I have never seen anyone be able to get it going in a way that is going to be scalable. And it's the technology at the user level is not there yet, nor is there the universal buy-in at the user level. And what I mean by that is we don't have a blanket way for people to use coins and or tokens or whatever to use those to buy goods and services largely on the open market, which has been one of the biggest stumbling blocks. And so I think that's one of the ones that we're seeing. But I think that in 20 years from now, if Bitcoin keeps going down the path it will, that will be the next evolution, and the next generation of this will be nation states starting to like go down that path. So I don't think you're wrong, or I don't think they're wrong. I just think that we're not there yet. If that helps.
So would we have to get to a point where, and I've heard some discussion about CBDCs, is that what, central digital bank currencies? Do we have to get there first before we can make the leap to an NFT, which, and maybe talk a little bit about the difference between those two?
Well, it's funny you just say that, because it's actually kind of comical that we would actually have to go to a central bank to achieve something that's completely supposed to be decentralized. But I mean, it's a great question you ask. And I don't think that we have to go to that point as far as getting that far down it. I think in order to achieve what you're referring to, and I believe we, and a number of people like me really good on this path, we need specifically the US federal government to step in and to start legislating, and or the regulators to step in and start regulating, and basically creating the guardrails for us, because it has to be the government before the regulations, because the regulators right now are not willing to step in and say anything without the courts giving them guidance. So to go with a centralized authority like a central bank, we're still a ways away from that until we get the government regulations in place that allow for the regulators to give their opinions, which then allow for the banks to be structured in the correct way. Does that help, Arthur?
Yeah, appreciate it.
There's another question that came in on the chat from Elijah Bushman. Is the Fed still looking at making their own coin? The central bank digital currency, he thinks, was the name they were going to go with.
Can't speak to the name, but I know they've been toying with it. The one I had heard about was them toying about was for intra-country transfers and whatnot like that. I'd heard about that. I haven't seen any movement in easily 12 months. I have not seen any movement surrounding digital currencies out of the government area or the Fed area. But like everything else with the Fed, they'll probably surprise me one day and like literally announce it in the newspaper, and I haven't heard about it. But I haven't seen it coming yet.
Okay, any other questions?
And did I get where everyone at least says that they can understand how all those different components come together between the blockchain and how they're linked together? And because again, it's not very easy to understand, but it is why what I was referring to when I was saying about the Rubik's Cube and how they're linked together. Those linkages between them are essentially what makes it so hard for hackers to, when I'm trying to break into something, sending an email, that's easy for me to snag in flight. But when you're looking at a blockchain, I can grab it, I can get my hands on it, but what makes it really difficult is that anywhere I touch it, it then makes it unusable and it lets the end user know that I tried to alter it. And so that's the thing I was really trying to get across, is that's really the difference between that and the email or the old school way of communications.
So, Lindsay, if I could just try to summarize your main points here that you've made throughout the presentation. Thanks, by the way, for all of your knowledge and experience. First, that from a technology and security standpoint, the cryptocurrency platform, the blockchain technology, is actually quite secure and quite immutable. And so there, you can place a lot of confidence in the immutability of the infrastructure and of the technology in use. That said, given the decentralization and the lack of regulation and central or maybe distributed accountability, makes the platform susceptible to use for nefarious purposes. And in fact, you've demonstrated that it's the method of choice for a lot of illicit activity. So, the fact that the technology is sound doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a lot of risk out there for people to use this, just because of the nature of the industry at this time.
You summed it up better than I ever could have, David. That's exactly right. I think the technology is wonderful. I really think I wish I had thought of it. It's genius. But the fact is, the surrounding things that we're seeing from, like you said, about the regulations, and also anytime you introduce people, human beings, man, we stink. we love to mess up everything that's nice out there. That's why we can't have nice things. I'm joking, but it's us as humans. The technology's good, like most things, but it's what we as people are using it for seems to be really where the problems are rising. All right, I think I might see one more question might be coming my way.
Yep.
And
some others are in the queue. So from Arthur, another follow-up question. In your opinion, what's the best way for an individual investor to quote unquote get in on NFT or NTF investing?
That one right there, it's the best people I've seen on that one, Arthur, is finding yourself a nice like go out, do your Google research on like finding a nice good exchange out there that you like. You can check with your financial institutions which ones, and I would start with your financial institutions, the ones that you know are reputable. Your bank, of course, start with them. A lot of their representatives will have people who can give you some names of some good exchanges to use. And if they don't, Google, you can check out the top Google exchanges and they'll all be ranked. I think that's a really good way to get your feet started. But I definitely would start, if someone wants to get in and they're a complete rookie, I would definitely go with the names you know, go with your financial institutions, and I would really, really go to your bankers and ask them, because a lot of them, again, will have people who they'll be very knowledgeable, and if they don't do it themselves, they usually can point you in the right direction. And then why wouldn't the blockchain make tracking down criminals easier? It's a great question. It's because it's all anonymous. It's all done through numbers and algorithms. And so what I mean by that is it's not like it's got Stacy Bunkelman's name associated with it. Everything's coded. And so when things are going across the internet, it doesn't have David Fanson as the originator of the transaction. It would have a bunch of, say, 456544321 would be a user identification code. When I was auditing it for another major accounting firm, I was brought in as the subject matter expert because essentially what was happening is a company that was a Chinese company was operating in the US and was operating crypto here in the US. Now, what was really becoming quite interesting about this was that, to your point, it was Chinese nationals who were buying money in the United States because the company was here in the United States. And they were basically allowing them to essentially money launder, because once they bought the money into crypto, the money then would be turned into essentially an old Swiss bank account, a numbered account. And the problem is, though, is it was relying heavily on the exchange, or this company in this case, to keep a linkage of the name Stacy Bunkelman is associated with this number. And a lot of these crypto companies were going way down the road of client confidentiality, and were basically destroying that upon implementation. And so they were basically just saying nope, and they weren't doing any query checks or background checks. So it was destroying the very start of where I could track these people from. And so in a lot of cases, when we went to audit them, when we expected nefarious means, we would have to go and reverse engineer it, which would be, all right, you say you have a suspect, now let me go look at them, and I would go and see where they took the money out and backtrace it through the internet. 10 times harder. But if to your point though, if it is being done correctly, you should upfront see Stacy Bunkelman's name associated with a number, and I should be able to see then where that transaction came in to Voyager Digital. Here's the query check. Here's the amount that was purchased. Here's the date it was purchased. Here's the app that it went into to make said purchase. And I can see it entering the internet. And then I would be able to track that number through all the different exchanges, because many of these exchanges are public as far as they show the records of the transactions, just not the names. And so I would be able to get it that way. Bit of an effort, but I can do it. All right, any other questions? Oh, Arthur. By the way, you should hear some of the stories I've got. It makes me real fun at parties. Thank you, Arthur. All right, if anyone else have any other, does anyone else have any other questions, thoughts? If not, I'm happy just to stay on the phone with the people in the conference room just to catch up at the end of this. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you both, David and Lindsay, for joining us, and all of our participants. I will be sending out a wrap-up and a follow-up email after our presentation. If you would like Lindsay or David's information, contact information, I'm sure that they are just going to be sharing that with everybody. So again, thanks for joining, and if you have any questions, feel free to stay on. I'm sure Lindsay would be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll hang out for a little while on the call here.
Have you had good experiences?
Really quickly, David, are you able to, no, never mind. All right, thank you, everybody. Just curious, does anyone in the room have any questions, concerns, comments? Did I do okay?
I think we're good. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll follow up with you both this afternoon.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.